The abandoned hospital, a spine-chilling encounter in Redwood Forest. The abandoned hospital in Redwood Forest had been empty for years, but that didn't stop an explorers from sneaking in to investigate its dark holes. One brave explorer, Alex, decided to venture into the hospital alone one night, armed only with a flashlight and his curiosity. As he walked through the dark corridors, Alex could hear footsteps echoing around him, but when he turned on his flashlight, he saw no one. The hospital was completely silent except for the sound of his own footsteps. And suddenly, he felt a cold breeze brush past him, and he heard a woman's voice whispering his name. He froze, unsure of what to do. Was he imagining things, or was there really someone else in the hospital with him? He tried to shake off the feeling and continued exploring, but he couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Every creaking floorboard made his heart race, and every shadow seemed to be alive with something sinister. As he made his way deeper into the hospital, he heard the sound of a door creaking open. His flashlight flickered, and he felt a rush of cold air on his face. He turned around to run, but something caught his foot, and he fell to the ground. He scrambled to his feet, and as he looked back, he saw a ghostly figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman in a white dress, her eyes fixed on him. As Alex felt a scream rising in his throat, but he couldn't make a sound. He was paralyzed with fear. The figure began to move towards him, and Alex knew he had to get out of there. He turned and ran, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the woman's laughter echoing through the halls as he made his way to the exit. Finally, he burst out of the hospital and collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. He looked back at the building and saw the woman in the white dress standing in the doorway, watching him. Alex never returned to the abandoned hospital in Redwood Forest. The memory of his encounter with the ghostly figure haunted him for years, and he knew he could never face that kind of terror again. To this day, the abandoned hospital remains a place of fear and mystery, with stories of ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena that continue to draw in brave explorers. But for those who have experienced the chilling presence of the woman in the white dress, it is a place to be avoided at all costs. The end. The cabin in the woods was supposed to be the perfect retreat for a family of four looking to escape the hustle and bustle of the city, but what they found inside would haunt them forever. As soon as they arrived, they felt a sense of unease. The cabin was nestled deep in the heart of Redwood Forest, surrounded by trees that seemed to stretch up to the sky. It was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about it. Strange noises echoed through the cabin at night, and the family could feel a presence watching them. They tried to brush it off as their imagination, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One night, they woke up to find all the chairs in the cabin stacked up in a pile in the center of the room. They were confused and terrified, wondering who or what could have done this. The family tried to leave the cabin the next day, but they found that they couldn't. The doors were locked, and the windows were sealed shut. They were trapped, and they had no idea why. As the days went on, the family's sense of terror grew stronger. They heard footsteps in the hallway and strange whispers in the dark. They tried to call for help, but there was no signal on their phones. They were alone, and they were being tormented by an unseen force. One night, they heard a loud banging on the door. It sounded like someone was trying to break in. The family huddled together, praying that they would make it through the night. But the banging continued, growing louder and more insistent. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the family was confronted by a figure in a dark cloak. It was a witch with eyes that glowed like fire. The family screamed and ran, but the witch chased after them, cackling with glee. They ran through the woods, trying to find a way out. But the witch was always one step behind them, her laughter echoing through the trees. Finally, they stumbled upon a group of hunters who had been searching for the witch for years. The hunters fought off the witch, and the family was able to escape. But they never forgot the horror they had experienced in the cabin in the woods. They never returned, and they warned others to stay away, for in that cabin something evil lurked, waiting to claim its next victims. The end. The Disappearing Campers, a tale of terror in Redwood Forest. A group of friends had been planning their camping trip for months. They were excited to explore the wilderness of Redwood Forest and spend a week surrounded by nature, but their trip took a terrifying turn on the third day. The campers, John and Emily, decided to go on a hike while the others stayed at camp. But when they didn't return by nightfall, the rest of the group began to worry. They searched for John and Emily for hours, calling out their names and scanning the woods with flashlights, but there was no sign of them. The remaining campers decided to leave the next day and report their missing friends to the authorities. But as they were packing up, they heard strange whispers in the woods. It sounded like someone was calling their names, but the voices were distorted and then they saw shadowy figures moving through the trees. They couldn't make out what they were, but they knew they weren't human. The group was terrified and decided to make a run for their car. As they drove away, they saw something that chilled them to the bone. John and Emily's tent was ripped open, and there was blood on the ground. It was clear that something terrible had happened to them. The group was in shock as they drove away from Redwood Forest. They had no explanation for what had happened to their friends or what they had seen in the woods. But one thing was clear: they never wanted to return to that place again. When they got home, they reported their missing friends to the authorities. But the investigation turned up nothing. John and Emily had vanished without a trace, and the campers had no answers. Years went by, and the group tried to put the traumatic experience behind them, but they could never forget the whispers in the woods or the shadowy figures moving through the trees, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they had been watched by something inhuman. To this day, the mystery of the disappearing campers remains unsolved. Some say that the woods of Redwood Forest are haunted by the spirits of those who have been lost there. Others believe that something far more sinister lurks in the shadows. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: Redwood Forest is not a place for the faint of heart. The end. The Ghostly Hitchhiker. It was a dark and stormy night, and four friends were in for a ride they would never forget. They had heard rumors of a ghostly hitchhiker that haunted Redwood Forest, but they laughed it off as superstition. As they drove deeper into the woods, the wind howled through the trees, and the rain beat against the windshield. Suddenly, they saw a figure on the side of the road, trying to flag them down. It was a woman in a white dress, soaking wet and shivering in the cold. She claimed to have been in a car accident and begged for a ride to the nearest town. The friends hesitated, but the woman seemed so desperate and vulnerable that they couldn't refuse. As they drove on, the woman sat silently in the back seat, her face hidden in the shadows. The friends tried to make small talk, but she didn't respond. They started to feel uneasy, but they didn't want to offend her. Suddenly, there was a flash of lightning, and the car skidded off the road. When the friends got out to assess the damage, they realized they were in the middle of nowhere. The rain was pouring down harder than ever, and they couldn't see anything beyond a few feet. They searched for their phones, but there was no signal. They decided to wait until the storm passed, hoping that someone would come along soon. As they huddled together in the car, they heard a faint whisper. At first, they thought it was the wind, but then they heard it again. It was the woman in the white dress. She was muttering something incoherent, and her voice was getting louder. Suddenly, she let out a blood-curdling scream, and the friends turned around to see that she had vanished. They searched the car and the surrounding area, but there was no sign of her. They were all trembling with fear, realizing that they had picked up a ghostly hitchhiker. The friends decided to make a run for it, but they couldn't find the way out of the woods. They stumbled through the rain and mud, their hearts pounding with terror. They heard strange noises all around them, and they were sure that they were being followed. Finally, they saw a light in the distance, and they ran towards it. As they reached the light, they saw a group of people gathered around a fire. They were relieved to have found help, but their relief turned to horror when they saw the woman in the white dress among them. She was staring at them with cold, dead eyes, and her lips twisted into a sinister grin. The friends realized too late that they had stumbled upon a group of ghosts who had been haunting the woods for decades. The ghost had lured them in with a ghostly hitchhiker, and now they were trapped forever. The friends tried to run, but it was too late. The ghost closed in on them, dragging them down into the darkness, and as they disappeared, their screams echoed through the forest, a warning to all who would dare to take a drive through Redwood Forest on a dark and stormy night. The end. The Possessed Doll. It was supposed to be a fresh start for the family. They had moved to a new home on the edge of Redwood Forest, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. But little did they know, they had brought something with them, something that would turn their lives upside down. The family brought an old doll with them, a family heirloom that had been passed down through generations. It was a beautiful porcelain doll, with a frilly white dress and golden curls. At first, the family thought nothing of it, but soon they began to notice strange things happening in the house. The doll seemed to move on its own, changing positions from room to room. The family would leave it on the shelf in the living room, only to find it in the bedroom the next morning. They tried to rationalize it, blaming it on their forgetfulness. but deep down they knew something wasn't right. Things only got worse from there. The family started hearing whispers in the middle of the night, and they could swear it was coming from the door. They tried to get rid of it, but every time they threw it away, it would find its way back into the house. One night, the family woke up to find the doll sitting at the foot of their bed. Its eyes seemed to follow them, and they could feel a cold breeze coming from its direction. Suddenly, the doll started moving on its own, its arms and legs flailing about. The family tried to grab the doll, but it was like it had a life of its own. It flew out of their grasp and landed on the floor, its head spinning around like something out of a horror movie. The family knew then that they had to get rid of the doll for good. They put the doll in a box and drove out to the middle of Redwood Forest. They dug a hole and buried the box deep in the ground. The family returned home, feeling relieved that the nightmare was finally over. But that was only the beginning. That night, the family heard scratching at their door. They went to investigate, only to find the doll sitting on their doorstep, staring at them with its lifeless eyes. The family screamed and slammed the door shut, but they could hear the doll laughing and scratching at the door all night long. The family knew they had to leave the house, but it was too late. The doll had possessed the house, and it wasn't going to let them go that easily. They fled the house, never to return. The doll ever remains in the house to this day, waiting for its next victim to possess. The end.